What up?
What is up?
How's it going, dude?
I'm doing well. How you doing?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Got my Celsius here. Getting ready for the day.
Yeah, I kind of got a little echo coming from your end. I see you have a stack of books. That's
Just,
good. I do as well.
I'm using this microphone. Ish,
Yeah. I mean, maybe check your input. I don't know. Can you hear me pretty well?
Hello.
Oh, that's a little better.
Hello. Is that better?
I think so. We'll go with it for now.
Roll.
If you're in the chat, let us know. Let us know how the audio sounds if it's from Abby's microphone. We can always work on fixing it, I guess. But welcome all you admirals of AI. This is AI Agents Hour. I'm Shane. I'm here with Abby.
What up?
Yeah, we're going to chat some AI today, like we do every Monday. If this is the first time you've tuned in, we do this pretty much every week. Sometimes more, sometimes almost never less. And we have a pretty good episode today. We're going to be talking AI news like we always do. We're going to bring Paul in from the Mastra team to talk about some docs updates. And then we're going to go deep on evals because evals is a hot topic right now. It has been for a while.
Yeah. Well, before we do that, how was your 4th of July?
Well, it was great, but I did dislocate my shoulder.
Oh, shit. How'd that happen?
So I have my left shoulder is pretty weak and I was tubing and I hit a massive, my friend sent me sky high on the boat and I landed, tried to hold on, popped my shoulder out, stayed on the tube, shook it out and it popped back in and it was fine. But
Dang.
But I've dislocated the shoulder like 6 times in my life, so like I've gotten good at like I don't think it fully dislocated because that'd be kind of hard to pop back in. It was like a partial dislocation. I could just like shake it back in and then it would pop back into place. So it's a little sore. But besides that, it was an amazing weekend. Got to spend some time with family and friends. And
did you see fireworks?
Yeah, I didn't go to any specific show, but where we were at, there was just like a ton of people around us, so we could just like observe everyone else's fireworks. We did shoot off a few. What about you? How was your 4th?
Dude, it was chill, but SF 4th is way weaker than LA for sure. Because
shots fired.
Shots fired, dude, because they're not that many people just doing fireworks illegally everywhere. And that's what makes 4th of July fun. But there was a bunch of, I went up the hill here and I saw a bunch near Bloom Saloon and stuff. So if you had a good vantage point, but then they just ended, and in LA they go off all night. So it's just a different vibe.
Yeah. Someday you have to come check out some South Dakota fireworks. We go pretty hard here in South Dakota.
I can only imagine if it's legal, how crazy the fireworks would be.
It's not legal in cities. Well, it's still, people do it all over, but it's not technically legal in like city limits. But where I was outside of like any big city limits, so people are just shooting them off all over.
Hell yeah!
Well, should we get into it?
Yeah, let's do it.
So this is a live show. That means if you're watching this on LinkedIn or YouTube or X or wherever you may be watching, you can leave us a comment. We try to respond to most of them. So let us know what you think as we go along through some of this stuff. The first thing we're going to talk about is we're going to do some AI news. So why don't we just get into that? And yeah, let me share my screen and we'll talk about the first bit. So I thought this was kind of interesting, XAI raised $5 billion in debt and then an additional $5 billion in equity. So 10 billion with a B, billion total. So that's a lot of money. Obviously it seems to be all around building out data centers, and they want to build the largest data center, right? And the idea is that if you have the most compute, you will have the best AI. I don't think Grok has the best AI today. Obviously, I don't think anyone does. Yeah. But it is kind of interesting to see if the bet's going to pay off, because if that holds true, they're going to be well positioned to potentially have some of the best at some point.
Yeah. Plus, raising more money can allow you to get more talent, and it's like an arms race now. So
Yeah. If anything, last week we saw the arms race for talent is getting insane.
Yeah. So, dude, if anyone who was doing ML and stuff like years ago, and then they were like all sad, like, oh man, I don't know about my life. Like, you better be happy today.
Yeah. Yeah. ML is the new like sporting event.
Yeah.
It's like you can be a professional athlete or just like a professional machine learning engineer, and
Yeah, dude.
you make
You
the
give
same amount of money.
you give your kids a choice. You know, like, hey, do you want to like be a basketball player or just be like a freaking nerd? And you can make big bucks.
Our time has finally come. Unfortunately, I'm not a ML background, but still, the nerds among us, which I
You
identify
know,
as.
just never gonna get professional at anything.
All right, so we got a question here from Spacework Dev. Quick question: any chance that with using Mastra networks, let's say after the network decided which agent is relevant, can we make it stick with it the next message and not use the routing again?
I mean, the answer is no today. But if you wanted to open up a GitHub issue, we can take a look at that feature request. Just a reminder, agent networks have two modes. One mode is just a generate or stream call. So it goes through the routing agent once, it picks its decision on what it's going to route to, and then returns the response to the user or you or whatever. And then you go to the next one. The second is loop. Loop is just, it goes in a loop until it figures out the problem. But in that loop, it goes back to the routing agent each time to decide where to go next. So, I mean, we could potentially do this, but you should open up a GitHub issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. That's a good place to start. And yeah, we can have a discussion and figure out how we could best do something like that. It'd be cool also to know, a little bit more on the use case of what
Yeah.
you're trying to build. I think I kind of get it, but it's always good to have some background context on what you're building. So that helps us decide what features and what other, similar types of users would want similar things. All right, so that was the first news article and the first question. So that's good.
Nice.
Let's go to the next one. And this one actually probably was around last week, but we didn't really talk about it much. So I figured we'd spend a little time talking about it today. The Gemini released their CLI. So, if you're familiar with Claude Code, that has a CLI. Gemini released their CLI, which they're touting, your open source AI agent. So you can basically bring Gemini right into your terminal. I think the whole idea is to be similar to what you can get with Claude Code.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. I haven't had a chance to try it yet. I have been using Claude Code a lot, but have you had a chance to try it out yet?
Yeah, I tried it out. It's pretty sick. Pretty fast too. And it has a lot of stars. It blew up. So people like it. It's gotten a good reception from maybe people who are Gemini fans, but even non-Gemini fans.
Yeah, do they have I don't see the GitHub link. Where's that at? I got to find that. Oh, right here. Contribute to this project. Yeah, I'm just pulling it up. Yeah, wow. 55,000 stars in
Like
not
2 weeks
very
or
long.
something. Yeah,
Dang.
pretty crazy.
Dang, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's very useful utility. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So if you are listening, let us know if you tried it out. How does it compare to Claude Code? I do think that having the large context could help. That's nice. And Gemini's one other benefit of Gemini is it's typically cheaper too than Claude. But also, I do wonder with those large context if it starts to add up over time. But it is nice to have the larger context window as an option.
Yeah. I don't know how. I didn't do any coding tasks with it though. I should have. Maybe I'll try after, but I don't necessarily use Gemini for coding tasks. I usually use it for things that need like a really big context window.
Yeah, I've been hearing some people starting to use Gemini more, but again, I think it's just a lot of this stuff is like it kind of depends on your preferences. It's like Coke or Pepsi, right? It's like
becoming like that.
I do think there are obviously models. Some models are better at other things. Like that is true. I think in general, Sonnet still outperforms most other models in coding tasks. But I think it somewhat depends on what you're doing, because I've seen people have good luck with all the major models, depending on what they're trying to build.
Yeah. I think what was it? Carpati was like, these are all like utility companies. So, makes sense. We're all just, maybe like before it was like based on where you live, right? Like what utility company you use. But now it's like based on your choice.
Yeah. And I think there's always going to be like some that shine at, certain tasks better than others. But we do have another, this is more of a comment. Be great to have something like an agent simulation testing, like one from Langwatch.
That would be great, wouldn't it?
Yes. It's a
I'll
great idea.
confirm.
I can confirm that would also be great. That's a pretty cool feature.
You should open a GitHub issue
Yes.
for things that you'd like to see in Mastra.
Yeah, that's a good call out. Yeah, if you just pop open a GitHub issue, obviously we can't add everything, but we do read all of that, and that all gets factored into when we're planning out our roadmap and what features we want to add. So, and that the other thing that's kind of nice about having a GitHub issue is if more people chime in that they want that, it's a good indication, right, of a feature that many people would like to see. So
yeah.
All right, moving right along. Next up, this one, I don't know why it's, give me 1 second to open it up. Apparently I lost the tab, but we'll pull it up here. Maybe we can even, I might need not be able to share the audio, but that's okay. We'll just read it. So Cursor released some updates. This came out a couple days ago, right before the 4th. Cursor 1.2. So there's agent to-dos, which is kind of interesting because you can kind of build a to-do list by the looks of it if you're watching it in this little video. And then it'll essentially kind of allows you the ability to structure the plan. That one of the great things about Claude Code is it actually builds its own to-do list, right? And then you can kind of see it as it goes through it. But sometimes you want to control the to-do list. You don't want to let the agent control the to-do list. So maybe I know I personally often, when I would be building features for myself, I would make a very detailed to-do list, and then I would just like churn through all those things, right?
Yep.
Now I can just take that to-do list, pump it into Cursor, and let it do its thing. It looks like you can queue up messages, memories. I'm curious to know more about that. PR indexing and search, improved embedding, faster tab completions, agent merge conflicts, and background agent improvements. So a whole bunch of things that came out.
I can attest that the update is really good because I'm a Cursor guy now, and
You're a convert. You were a Cursor, then you converted back.
Yeah. Agent to-dos is really cool if you are a control freak, so like that's good. The background agents have been improved. I've been playing around with that a lot. Tab completion, you can like tab to victory so quickly now, way quicker than last week. And I'm pretty new here too. I can see the sharp difference given I just converted, right? So I can see how much they've already improved. Code search is a lot faster. I haven't tried memories though yet. I don't really care about that right now. So yeah, dude, it's sick. I should have been on it sooner, but maybe this was destiny. I had to come through this way.
You had to go through the path. All roads lead back.
I could see how people use Claude Code versus this, but I could also just see how it's just so easy to use Cursor on web and everything. Like, so it's just like a dream.
So I think this is now story time because we were hanging out. Well, it was last week, I guess. Time is with the holiday is kind of weird, but yeah, it was last week, and you were just firing off tasks, background tasks to Cursor on your Safari browser on your iPhone as we were having a beer at the bar.
Yeah, because I was using background agents in Cursor just to play with it. And then I saw this like tweet last week that they have a PWA for Cursor, and I was like, oh shit, you can use this in the browser. So then on our way to where we were going, I think we were going to happy hour. I just started launching things off, and then I've been still following up with those tasks. I didn't implement any of the code they generated, but it got me to think about where I wanted it to go, like without even having to do the work. Because I was hanging out with you, and then like later on, I was like, oh yeah, here are all the ideas I had, and then it went and like explored them for me. So it was so sick. I love it. I still use it. I'm like firing off some stuff right now before the before this live stream.
Which is the funny thing is I've seen, obviously, I've worked with you for a long time. So you used to, you would often come up with an idea and kind of pave the rough path and then hand it off to someone to kind of explore the path and report back. And then together you'd often like decide how to actually move forward. But now it's like you can just send it off as soon as you think about it. You don't have to wait for someone to say like, okay, I got some time to like explore this. You can let an AI agent explore the path, decide if it's the right approach, or at least learn a little bit from their approach and say, okay, that's either cool or not. And
yeah, it's like vibe coding. It's like literally vibe coding feature or like product features that you're going to throw away, but you're like talking to the agent and you're not really necessarily giving it context, all the context it needs. You're like talking it very conceptually, and then it does a pretty good job of finding context within the repo and then kind of making stuff happen. Even if the code is not going to be accepted, it probably saved me like 20 hours. And then I just did it while drinking with you, which is amazing.
It's like the new way to do like throwaway prototypes. It's like,
yeah,
like we know we're going to throw this prototype away. I just want to see what it would look like and see how it feels.
Yeah.
And maybe it doesn't even fully work, but it gets you close. And then, we're just going to throw it away and pay, $20 or $50 in compute for or whatever it costs. Right.
Yep.
And that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right. One more news story here, and then we're going to bring in Paul for the last news story because he might have some opinions.
Cool.
But this one is, we like to always just talk about these. I don't know if I have any insights into it or if you do, but it's nice to talk about any new open weights or open source models. So Baidu has released Ernie 4.5, and for those of you, most of you probably all know this, so I'll be just reiterating things but if you see these model names, DeepSeek's the same way. The first number is the number of parameters, so 300 Bs, 300 billion parameters. The second number is how many, if it says an A47B, that's how many active parameters are active at one time when it's doing inference. But it talks a little bit about its pre-training. It used a mixture of experts, a multimodal mixture of experts pre-training approach. Talks about, how they scaled the infrastructure, and then talked about how they did post-training. And then, of course, it has some benchmarks. The interesting thing is that the 300B model surpassed DeepSeek's 671B model on 22 of the 28 benchmarks. Now, there's 47 billion active parameters in this model compared to DeepSeek's 37 billion active parameters. But it is, fairly impressive, right? That it is, as far as like open source models are concerned.
Yeah, totally.
It is, it compares pretty favorably.
Baidu AI Studios always has like, they're Chinese, by the way. Of course they are. And their logo is a paw print, which also is like supports my theory that all Chinese AI studios will be like animals and all American ones will be buttholes. So
if you haven't seen the meme about every AI logo looks like a butthole, once you see it, you can't unsee it. So
can't unsee it.
If there's one thing that you want to tune into us for, it's our conversation about AI logos and what they represent or look like. So
I like these benchmarks though. But benchmarks.
Yeah. I'm almost like, to be honest, I'm like, there's like benchmark overload because there's like new benchmarks coming out that support, because ultimately if you're developing a model, you also usually develop certain benchmarks that make your model look good. It's not always the case, and obviously a lot of these are some standard benchmarks that have been run before. So that's good. You want to see them, fare well on different benchmarks. But ultimately, I think it comes down to you'd want to test this and see how it actually compares for the types of tasks that you have your applications or agents actually doing.
There's so many models coming out. I want to build one. Maybe like a little like Hello World one.
Yeah, you want to train your own like small model?
Yeah, maybe on Mastra or something. That'd be actually a good live stream too. I don't know how to do it. We'd have to figure it out.
Yeah, we need one of those like
Andy can come help.
Yeah, maybe Andy, or yes, some machine learning person come help us do some at least a minimum, like we should fine tune a model.
That'd be cool too.
Yeah, we could fine tune a Quen model or something.
I saw Professor Andy on Friday or last week.
Yeah,
someday.
We need to get him. We bring him Andy back in for what do we call the segment? Builders Learn ML.
Yeah. He's been doing some cool shit. He could teach us some stuff.
Yeah. Last time we talked about just like reinforcement learning and things like that. So we'll get Andy back on. He'll teach us non-ML peeps some ML.
Yeah.
All right. And I'm going to bring Paul on for this next one here. And he doesn't know what he's getting into, but welcome.
What up, Paul?
Hello. How's it going?
It's going. Happy Monday. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. I'm glad you're bringing me in for a news item to have an opinion on rather than the previous conversation about American AI company logos, because I don't have an opinion on that.
Dang it. We missed out a funny opportunity there. But yeah, so this one came across, I think it was about last week, and was interesting in my opinion because I have a point of view on it, but I'm curious, what your point of view is, Paul and Abby. So Cloudflare released pay per crawl. So it enables content owners to charge AI crawlers for access. So if you read this, the idea is, all these model companies are taking content from the internet, using it for their training, and the authors of that content are not getting any kind of royalty or any kind of payment for basically providing the training data for all these models. So the idea is, what if there was an option for you when one of these model company crawlers comes to your site, you could say, you can have this data for this price if you want to crawl it, and then through some magic behind the scenes action, you get paid a small, whatever your price is for that content. They can decide if they want to pay that price or not, or they can move on. I'll leave it at that. I have strong opinions on this, but I'm curious what you all think. And if you're in the chat, let us know. What do you think of this? Is this a good idea?
Go for it, Paul.
Oh, I'm not sure which side to come down on until I've heard your point of view and
I don't. That's
strong
why
opinions.
I don't want to bias you on what I think about it.
Well, I guess first and foremost, so long as it doesn't change the reader's experience, and perhaps there is an opportunity here to improve reader's experience, because it might mean that we would reduce the amount of ads that need to be on a site, which might help fund content publications. And I guess you also need to consider like the different types of content publications. Some aren't commercial. My blog, for instance, I don't earn any money from that. I just do it because I like to write. And so it really doesn't bother me. The whole idea of me writing to put my stuff out there is so that it can be shared. But that's not always the case. And there are obviously like complete commercial aspects to content publication. And if, they are effectively, well, none of these models involve giving content away for free. They monetize it in various ways, one being ads. And if LLMs are scraping content, they're not going to be susceptible to ads. Then I think being able to monetize it in a different way is a good thing. And I think if we don't, how are these content publications able to survive, which ultimately means we're potentially shutting down the freedom of sharing information. So I think it's a small thing to pay for. No one's probably going to be impacted by it. And it means that things that are in place and live can maintain being in place and live.
It's very poetic in terms of the response. For me, like if you think about utopian world of agents and stuff, every agent will have a ramp card with the budget. If it's crawling the web and hits some paywall, whether that's the New York Times or whatever, or any paywall, if it needs to buy something to accomplish its task, I can see a world where that is true, right? I'm pretty sure we all can. The problem with something like this, and I think Cloudflare did that with like the password or like the bot protection and like all these different types of services that they have, they like take over the content experience, right? Have you ever seen like the You're Not a Robot Cloudflare check on every website? If they try to verify you. So I think if you're down with that, that's cool. You can have that. But then, yeah, what if you're not making any money from your content? Are you now gonna get money from it because you wrote something for free that is then, sold? Yeah, it's just complicated, dude. But the mechanism is tight, and I believe in the mechanism. Like, you should be able to buy stuff that is for sale or that paywalls you. You have the choice to go through the paywall or not. I don't have any other political opinions about the content laws or anything.
Yeah. So here's my opinion. So I am typically an optimist. So I'm going to say that, like, it's easy to be a critic, but I don't believe this shit's going to work. And here's why. I think if you look at just the content web of what people posting, most people do not pay for content online. Some do, and there are some publications that have made it work. But in general, most people, do not typically pay for content. When you go to a search engine, you expect that content to be there. And if it's not there, you don't ever read it. You probably don't ever find it. I think the same is going to be true if you go into ChatGPT and someone wants to charge, a crawler $4 to crawl their content. They're just going to say, no, I'll just get the content from the next person that didn't charge, that has similar types of content, and train it on that. And then when you ask ChatGPT a question, you're going to get that other person's content, not the one who wanted to charge the $4 for the crawler to access their stuff. That's my opinion. I kind of hope I wouldn't mind being wrong, because I want content creators to be monetized for the creation of their content. I think we all do. It is a lot of work. If anyone's ever written anything, it's not easy to do, but especially if you want it to be good, it's like, that's a lot of work to actually put together high quality content. And one of the challenges with AI is it just takes your content and summarizes it often, and doesn't actually like deliver the direct content. But I would say a lot of these models, do provide sources now. They're getting better with providing information of where they got that information. So it does drive back people to your website, just like search engines often did. We see it on of course, every business is going to allow their content to be crawled freely, but we see quite a bit of traffic coming from ChatGPT on the Mastra website, for instance, right? So that ChatGPT is recommending Mastra for some question, and they're citing the source, and then people are clicking through that source, getting back to Mastra. And I think that if you turn that off, even if you want to charge a nominal amount, which you think is a small amount, I think the inconvenience of it and the amount that inconvenience will most likely lead to you just getting ignored. So that's my take. I don't think it's going to work. I would love to be wrong.
Isn't that the lens of like a small content creator? Like, the people who charge paywalls are like big publications, or if you're on like Medium or some shit, or you have a paywall.
So yes, great. That's actually a good point. But here's the thing: they're not going to use Cloudflare's thing to do that.
No, yeah,
if you're a big content creator, you're going to do a deal directly with the model company, right? Like, once you hit that. So maybe there's this middle ground of like people that are big enough that can't pay the lawyers to do the deal with the big model company. Maybe there's some middle ground where some people do it, but it's a huge risk if you do that as a kind of mid-tier publisher, and then nobody that uses these AI tools ever gets your stuff.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure like these models were trained on a pro version of the New York Times, right? Like, they weren't just crawling shit, stealing information that was behind paywalls to train their stuff. Maybe they were, or maybe it's like the no-name creators that are the ones getting jacked.
Yeah,
they put it on for free.
A lot of these, and there's been some legal cases where they've, like Reddit made a bunch of money from their content with some model providers. So the bigger companies are already getting paid because they're bringing suits, lawsuits into action, and they're going through the process. But anyways, I do think that this specific thing I don't think it's going to work. Maybe something like it emerges. I would love to see it. I don't believe that it's going to work. I don't think it's going to help the little guys out. Maybe the mid-tier players can get some value out of it. I don't think the large publishers are going to care because they're going to do their own thing. That's my take.
Yeah, they should have like an HTTP header for agents, not like, and then anybody could do whatever they want when an agent crawls your site. That should just be a standard, and then everyone can figure their own, like on a standard, they can figure out what to do.
All right. Well, that was the AI news. We do have a couple comments here. So from Vamp, if anyone I used to do a bunch of Drupal videos and stuff. I started my open source career doing Drupal stuff. So, but Vamp, if you are looking into crew AI, you should just look into Mastra. If you are doing Drupal, it means you know some PHP. You maybe did some JavaScript and some jQuery on the front end. TypeScript is closer to JavaScript than Python is. So you should just use Mastra. But cool to see you. And yeah, I think a lot of people. Yeah, it's definitely a throwback. It was like 14 years ago when I started that, I think. But for those of you, I think a lot of people could probably relate to this, though. You may be a web developer coming from a different area of expertise than, we kind of joke that we're not machine learning experts because we're not. We were web devs, right? I think that's our background. I think everyone on here's background. So I think a lot of people can relate to that. All right. Will you guys be doing any events or talks in the Bay Area anytime soon?
Yep. That's all we could say, I guess.
Yeah. What do we got on the docket? I mean, we're kind of all over, but I don't know what we have actually planned in the near future.
I think the biggest thing is maybe MCP night when we get approved or not.
Yeah, we might be. Yeah, we might be at. We will be at MCP night. We may be speaking at MCP night, so that'll be one event.
From that perspective, we're at like every event you could think of. We're there in some capacity.
Yeah, if there's a big AI event, you will very likely see someone from Mastra with some books.
Yeah,
we bring these everywhere. These are. So if you want a book, find the big AI events, and you will find us.
If you see this book at a meetup that you're at, we were there. We just missed you or something.
Yeah. Although I have heard people say they just randomly find books, at some of these like leftovers that didn't get picked up at some of these events. So
we may or may not have planted those.
Most likely we did.
Yeah, but no one will know.
All right. And with that, we are going to, even Paul's got a copy. Everyone.
I've traveled with it. I'm going to start leaving it in various Airbnbs that I stay in.
Hey, if you're watching this, if you just leave us a comment here in the chat, and I will find a way to get you a book if you want a book. So
yeah,
if you want a book, if you're one of the people watching this right now, if you leave a comment live, I will find a way to get you a book. Now, the caveats being we can't ship to a lot. There's quite a few countries we can't ship to. So we can ship to quite a few countries, but there's many that we can't. So yeah, if I can send you a book. Otherwise, you can, of course, always go to this link here and get the digital copy. So if you just want to read it, see what it's about. It's not all about Mastra. So it is actually just general building AI agents and AI applications. Does show a little Mastra code, but it's mostly just illustrative for example purposes of like how to think about things. All right, Paul, we wanted to bring you on to talk about docs. So what do you have for us today?
I have a couple of things actually, mainly around playground and deployment. Now, it's not to say that we've seen anyone having difficulties with this, but when I was looking over the docs, it was something that I wanted to make sure that was absolutely crystal clear. And I think I've mentioned this once or twice before, is that Mastra is almost too flexible. Like you can deploy it anywhere. And it's sort of coming out in the docs. The more I look into this, I'm like, all right, yeah, you could do it that way as well. So I wanted to just show, I guess, what I would consider to be the happy path for deploying a Mastra application, but we will also cover some other bits and pieces in the docs if you don't deploy to Mastra Cloud. So let me get some screens going here. Let's see. How's my Zoom, Shane? Up a little bit?
Yeah, whatever you think, one more click is what I always recommend. That's
That
probably
looks all
pretty
right.
good. Yeah, that's good.
All right, cool. So in the docs, we have, or we've always had actually, but it's just been revamped, is our Mastra Cloud section. Currently in public beta, but you can sign up and get going and it works and it's cool. And I've been through and sort of documented and illustrated the different features that we offer. It is, I think, the easiest way to get up and running with Mastery. You just hook up your GitHub repository, click deploy, enter a couple environment variables, and you've now got exposed endpoints. We've got a full step-by-step now for how to sign up, whether it's going to be with GitHub or Google, or sign in rather. Connect your master app to the repo, create a new project, import your Git repository, configure it, and deploy. And away you go. You've got Mastra up and running with the playground. So that leads me on to the next thing, which is a revamped local dev playground. So I'm sure if you've built a Mastra application, if you run npm run dev, you'd be looking at a playground. So this gives you the opportunity to add inputs and various things, and you can see how agents, tools, and workflows work in your application. We've also covered that here. Oh, there's you, Shane, with some little videos just to show, this is what happens in Master Playground, which allows you to test locally. That's an example of an agent. You can see the response. This is what happens with workflows. This one is showing a workflow with branching, which I think looks really cool, but it allows you to visualize the steps or the decisions that are made in your workflow. And it allows you to inspect each one and check the input and output.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second, Paul? Because we got a question, and I think what you're illustrating here is part of the answer to that question, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So the question is, can you talk briefly about the difference between Crew AI and Mastra? And so I would want to take a detour just for a second. I think Crew AI is Python, Mastra is TypeScript. That's probably, by and large, is going to be a big difference, right? You're choosing a different language of how you want to build agents. Crew AI started with this idea of, multiple agents working together, and then they eventually added flows because they realized that you do need workflows, which you kind of just demonstrated a little bit there, Paul, but you need the more definitive workflows with when you're dealing with LLMs and agents today. So Mastra has a lot of the same things. We have workflows. We have the concept of agents. We have the concept of agent networks or groups of agents working together. One thing that Mastra has that Crew doesn't have, at least as far as I'm aware, like I haven't used it in the last few months, but at least as far as I know, we have this visual playground. And to be honest, one shameless plug of why we came up with this playground is because I was a Drupal developer back in the day, and I liked the admin that Drupal gave you, where you can install modules and piece things together. And I know a lot of you probably have never used Drupal, but you've probably used WordPress, which I think Drupal is technically superior to WordPress, but WordPress is way better at marketing. And so, but a lot of the ideas are you want this visual testing ability, this way to kind of like see things and verify that everything is working. And that's one thing I think a lot of people say is the playground is what kind of connects it all together. So you write your code, but you at least can test and verify things in like a visual playground. And that's what Paul's showing here. So momentary detour, Paul, I'm going to hand it back over to you. But I think that was like what you're showing here is one of the biggest differentiators between us and a lot of the other, I guess, frameworks that are out there.
Yeah, no worries. And I agree, like the local dev playground allows you to fully build agents, tools, and workflows without ever touching like your front end application, or you don't need to introduce any UI elements to be able to have inputs that work, and you can sort of then inspect the way that your agents work. Now, the reason I wanted to kind of show this and Mastra Cloud is that on Mastra Cloud, you have the same thing. You can then test your workflows in I guess what would be a production environment, but on Mastra Cloud. So like what you have locally is what you also have when the agent's deployed. Now, the last thing I wanted to cover was, in other areas of deployment, is we do have our own like deployer packages, which would allow you to deploy your Mastra application to, let's say, Vercel. So it's very straightforward now. We've removed all of the config in your Mastra instance. You literally just do new Vercel deployer, install the package, and that will allow the same CI, git push, and whatever, and you can deploy your Mastra application to Vercel. But the thing you don't get when you deploy to other platforms, and this is the same if you went with any of these other cloud providers, is you don't get the playground. So that is one huge advantage for me, is that, one, Mastra Cloud is super simple to set up and deploy, but you're effectively getting the exact same thing in the cloud that you had in local dev, which allows you to better test how your application would work in a real world. You're actually talking about proper network requests and all the rest of it. So that was kind of where we were at today with the docs. There are some other things that people have asked about that we've also introduced. One thing that was maybe slightly confusing for folks is when you integrate Mastra into an application. So we do have this framework section where if you wanted to add Mastra to a next application, you wouldn't need to do anything in addition to deploy it. This would just deploy alongside your Next.js application, and Vercel knows how to handle it. So lots of options, whether it's a standalone Mastra application or an integrated Mastra application. You can deploy it in a number of ways. But I think, I'm going to champion Mastra Cloud just because you get the beautiful playground experience everywhere.
Dude, sick. Good work on those docs too.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. Anytime we add good docs, we get a reduction in questions about those topics. And I haven't seen a lot of questions about them, which is good. And then, dude, Mastra Cloud's looking pretty nice. Dude. That looks pretty good.
Yeah.
Looking pretty good over there.
The team's been cooking,
Yeah. It used to be our unwanted child around here, but now we love it, just like everybody else.
Yeah. We kind of focused so much on just building the framework that Cloud had fallen a little bit behind, but now it's looking good.
We're cooking.
All right. Anything else you wanted to chat about today, Paul?
No, I will be staying tuned though for your Evals deep dive though, because that's something that's interesting. So you can hurry me out of the chat. I've done my docs thing now. You can get on to more interesting things.
Well, for those of you wanting to see what Paul's up to, you can follow Paul on X or Twitter right there on the screen. And we will bring you on again soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'd love to come back. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, Paul.
All right. See you later. Bye.
See ya. All right, dude.
It's game time. 124 people in here. Thanks for being here, guys.
Yeah, thanks for tuning
Y'all.
in. We have a few people that want some books. Ben. I'll see what I can do. I'll find
you. A book. You get a book.
Yeah, you get a book. So, Ansuman, I can't send you a book. I'm sorry. Unfortunately, I cannot send you a book.
Move to London.
But you have the digital copy. Someday we will figure it out, and when we do, we will let everyone know. But India is one of the countries that is not quite as easy to ship to. And we have had a lot of people ask, so we'd love to figure it out. But all right, so I guess we should talk evals. Maybe we set the stage, and then I do have kind of have an FAQ blog post that we can kind of read through together, because I think it's probably good information, and then we can dive in.
I have a lot of spicy takes on this shit, so I'm ready to go.
All right.
Okay, so here's the thing. Evals, I don't think evals are like tests anymore. That's one thing. I truly think it really is an observability thing. It's like a metric. Like you're collecting metrics, and then based on metrics, you are then going to change something in your application. So this becomes like more of a reliability and observability problem than some agent bullshit. And if you look at like the market now of evals, there are a bunch of people providing eval tools, frameworks, products. And when you get down to and I don't want to discredit any of those because you're going to need tools to really do that at scale, but you don't need big evals to do evals. And that's my new statement. Big eval doesn't want you to know that you could just do evals yourself in the beginning, right? You don't need to use anything actually to do evals. You could do it yourself if you really want to. And I'm sure, Hamill, that we're going to see his blog posts, he also has a lot of that kind of vibe as well. It's like learning the fundamentals of how you score something and then what to do with the data after. I think right now, all these eval products are becoming like SOC 2. You just have to have it and you check the mark off. Do you have evals? Yeah, we use this product. We use Langsmith or we use whatever. And then maybe you don't even ever write actual evals that are good. You just have it so everybody, your investors, your customers are like, oh, do you have evals for your product? And you say yes. That's my take right now. Sorry. Big eval, dude. I'm anti-big eval now. Until we become big eval, and then I'm good with them again.
Yeah, well, we will be the open version of open big eval.
We'll be open eval.
I think that's already a thing. So we'll have to find a different name.
That's true. That's Matt Pocock's thing, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. There's something called open evals. We'll have to come up with a different
Pretty sure that's his thing. He probably had the same vibe as us. Like, what's all these big evals trying to do stuff?
Open eval. What is that? Yeah.
Or maybe it's LangChain. One of these fools got it.
Yeah. So someone coined it first.
Someone got it.
But yeah, should we maybe just browse through this post a little bit? I think it could be useful.
Yeah. And I can talk to it too. Sure.
We'll kind of set the stage here around, we'll go through. It's kind of reads like an FAQ, I guess. I mean, it's kind of long, so we will, but it was just published yesterday, actually. So it's probably something good to, if we were to read a blog post on a live stream, this is probably a good one to read. We won't read it all, but.
Yeah, that guy's cool too.
Yeah. Hamill's cool. All right. So let's go through the first question. Is RAG dead?
Let's click it up. Or increase.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Is RAG dead? Should I avoid using RAG?
Oh man, it's funny. This is where all this stuff started, right? Where people were starting to do evals. I don't think he thinks RAG is dead.
Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of the important part. I think RAG has been a buzzword, and everyone thinks RAG means vector search. You have to use vector, but RAG is much more than that. It just means retrieval, augmented generation. It means you're going to retrieve data, feed it into the context. That even if you're using large context windows like Gemini, there's still times when you're going to want to control what context goes into that. And that is going to be some kind of RAG system. So RAG isn't dead. You don't always need it, but I think it's become a little more nuanced. So I think the follow-up, I agree with this.
Yeah.
So rather than avoid it or embrace it, maybe you just need to experiment with how to retrieve stuff, whether that's just from a database, doing like a keyword search, or whether that's using a vector DB. Ultimately, you'll have to do some experimenting, do the work, do the legwork, and figure out when RAG might be useful. And then you don't need to, maybe not everything is RAG. Like I think before, like everything needs to be RAG. Now it's a little more nuanced, but it's definitely not dead.
The problem is like now that RAG is a buzzword, like it harms like other things that you do. Because if you're just doing vector search, then maybe you shouldn't call it RAG. It's just like you have a vector search tool to do that. But if you think about LLM as a judge, it itself is RAG because it needs to retrieve the input and output from the agent call. It needs to augment it by passing it to the context window that it has, and then it needs to generate scores and prompts. So everything, if it wasn't a buzzword, we could say everything is RAG.
In a lot of ways, yeah.
In a lot of ways. But because it's a buzzword, we can't. So maybe it's EAG, which is not going to catch on. which is extraction of, you extract data, you augment it, and then you generate it. But anyway, that's like another.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. I think in some ways it's like in the new term. First, it was like prompt engineering, and then it was like, okay, RAG, and then now everyone's starting to talk about, and then like evals was important, agents, right? You got all these buzzwords, and then the new one that's taken off is context engineering. And it's like, okay, well, RAG's a component of context engineering. Prompt engineering is a component of it. You know, you have all these things that kind of feed into it. And like context engineering is now the broad term that'll eventually become overused and everyone will hate it. But that's just the way that these cycles end up going.
Maybe it's working. It's all the way back up to AI engineering.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Everything is just, or even broader, everything's engineering.
Everything. Just, yeah, David would like that one for sure.
Yeah, everything is just engineering.
It's all just engineering.
All right, so let's move on to the next one. Can I use the same model for both the main task and evaluation? So this is for LLM as judge. Abhi, for people who don't know, what's LLM as judge? This might be new to some people.
So LLM as judge is when you take the output of your agentic process. It's not just like an agent call. It could be anything that uses LLMs. You take the input and output and all the options and all that stuff, and then you take and another LLM. It could be the same model, and you give it a criteria to score that output based on the input, given good examples, bad examples, or another way to put it, you could score it however the fuck you want, right? That's how it should be. And that's up to you as a user. But there are these things called off-the-shelf LLM as judges, where they do specific things like they test for hallucination. That's like a topic area in an auto eval. There is answer relevancy, factual correctness, etc. Tool call correctness. All this stuff exists. Whether they matter to you, I don't know. Probably not, or probably, because like every agent is different.
And if you read their response here, I think for the most part I agree. It basically says you can use the same model. It's typically fine because the judge is doing a different task. You have it do one thing in your first, whatever that your application's doing, it's doing one thing, and then you're having it evaluate, which is a completely different task. So it's not like it's going to necessarily be too biased on, like thinking its own response is better for some reason. Yeah. You can use a different model, of course. I think this is the statement that I would 100% recommend. Start with the most capable models. Like just pay the money, use the best model for evals at the beginning, and then over time, once you have evals running, you can of course like maybe try a lesser model to be the judge. But ultimately, you got to think about if you're having someone judge output, you want the smartest person or the smartest model deciding if it was a good response. One thing they mention here that's important, the judges they recommend are scoped binary classifications tasks, which means I think Hamel's general advice is it should be a 1 or 0, either it passed or it didn't. And the reason is you can then easily see. Now, some people don't like that. Some people want like a range. And so at Mastra, we give you all the ability to do either, but like Hamel's take is it should be a 0 or 1. You either pass or fail. And the idea is then you can decide if you have a higher rate of passes or higher rate of failures rather than doing like some kind of average score.
0, 1 is good, or 0 scaled to 1. Because the thing is, and I'll say it again, like you should be able to score things however you want, right? Like, and that's on the author of an eval. So yeah, like yes or no, cool, or you could do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Which I know is not a great answer, but it's the truth.
Yeah. I do think if you were to start, having it be yes or no are the easiest evals, because you as a human could also verify that, you agree with the LLM as a judge or not. Right. And I think so if you are starting, this is probably the best place to start. Is either is it a pass or a fail? The other thing that Hamel recommends, which I don't 100% agree with this, but recommends that, don't using the same model for open-ended preferences or response, because they don't recommend using basically having a model provide like context around whether it was a good response or not. I think there's some value in seeing some reasoning around it. So we we'd like to provide that as an option. But again, you don't have to use it. It's kind of up to you on how you want to build your evals out.
And reasoning doesn't come in the same LLM call. It's like a separate one. So I could see how it could be biased if you put everything in the same prompt. But anyway.
How much time should I spend on model selection?
I don't really agree with this because everyone be changing models every day. And then they be complaining to us like why their stuff's broken or whatever. And they're not measuring things after they change or before they change or when they upgrade. And so if you were writing evals and collecting data, you could not necessarily spend time on model selection, but you could start having data for it if you start changing, and then you can decide for yourself.
Yeah, well, I think you actually, maybe you agree, because I think that's what they're saying is, does your error analysis, meaning like your data, suggest that your model's a problem, then maybe change. Otherwise, don't mess with it.
Yeah, but oftentimes I don't know if it's the model, or maybe the model just hides imperfections that you have running in your own system. Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think the short answer is you need data. So
yeah,
if you're just changing model and trying to like see if is it actually better or not, I think before you fixate, as as said here, on selecting a new model, you should probably just make sure you're doing evals and you have the data before you worry about like trying different models. Like focus on that first.
What's that thing we heard during YC where like, and I don't know if we knew that did it, but like startups are waiting for new models to start doing feature work or something because like they believe in, remember that stuff?
Yeah. It's like
the
next model change is going to unlock new capabilities. And so they're just like, they're waiting on the models to get better before their, technology really works. And yeah.
If you have the luxury, more power to you.
Yeah. I think you shouldn't wait. You can build a lot of cool things with the models that we have today. And honestly, another hot take is I think it to me seems like the model progress is starting to slow down. I think people are like, I think we're still making improvements. Some of those improvements are great because every new improvement unlocks new capabilities. But I do think that in general, like the gaps of the jumps so far have started to slow a little bit. Now, maybe there's a new model right around the corner that's going to blow people away. And I think every time there's a new model, there's something new that is pretty exciting, like it is exciting, but I don't think like we're having these quantum leaps anymore. But every new small increment does open up like new things that could be automated or improved. So I think even small changes are good. I just don't think we're having as big of progress as we were potentially 2 years or a year and a half ago.
We need quantum leaps. We need some quantum leaps going on, man.
So there's a question. Isn't LLM as a judge a bit counterintuitive if the domain is not aligned to the LLM and we give that control to the LLM to determine a score?
Indeed. That's why off-the-shelf evals may or may not be good for your agent because of some general thing.
And I think, the idea is like that's why you pay for the more expensive LLM, right? You use the best model because those models typically, let's say it's like a legal review, right? Those models will typically be trained on, a larger amount of data, right? Has more training parameters. It'll likely do a better job than, a smaller model, but it might not be specifically trained or fine-tuned on whatever the domain is. So if it's like legal or like law or accounting or something, you eventually could get to the point where you could fine-tune a Quen model or some smaller model on that corpus of data and have that be your judge. And you might get better results or more accurate results. So essentially you're kind of fine-tuning or training your own judge. So yes, I think there are ways to probably improve it, but once you get into that part, like that is still very expensive. You probably should make sure you just have basic evals first that actually, a more expensive LLM can give you reasonable results of understanding the context. But yeah, that is definitely something to think about.
Yeah. Big Eval wants you to use the most capable models. I'm sorry. Just keep going.
all the model the model companies want us to use the most expensive model for sure.
Yeah, big companies want big evals to tell you to use all the big models.
All right. Should I build a custom annotation tool or use something off the shelf?
I disagree with this one as well, but
Yeah, I don't think you. I think there's a balance. I think you should. So my take is you don't need to write. You shouldn't need to write everything from scratch because you're just reinventing the wheel. But you shouldn't assume that you can just take all these off the shelf evals and everything just works perfectly.
exactly.
My take, and it's a biased take, obviously, because we're the Mastra guys.
For us,
But my take is you should use a lightweight framework that provides you some structure so you don't have to think about the structure. Maybe you can learn from some of the off-the-shelf evals because you may want to see how they work and see how the data is structured, but then you should probably write custom evals that are specific to whatever you're trying to accomplish. So in the case of whatever it is your application is trying to do, write evals that correspond to that specific task. And then, so custom evals with a lightweight framework that kind of helps you like not have to worry about the structure or data storage or all that.
yeah.
That would be my take.
This question though is about the annotation part.
Yeah. Because I think the suggestion is his suggestion is you build your own UI annotation tool or
use
Excel
a spreadsheet or whatever.
Yeah. I just think there's, again, you're kind of reinventing the wheel. It's the same take. It's just ultimately, if you use something that's lightweight that provides some of the mechanisms to do the annotation, you don't have to worry about it. You should still focus on building your custom evals, but then you don't need to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah. I mean, Big Eval definitely wants people to use off-the-shelf tools because that's how they get paid, right? They're putting a UI around a database that stored all these results for you. But what if it was open source and you just use it? That's our take, because who wants to build another annotation tool? It's all the same shit. You're just adding comments to rows. You're doing some stuff asynchronously that the framework would have to be linked into anyway. So might as well just use something that is designed for open source.
And ideally, that annotation tool would allow you to like export the data if you needed to, or give you access to the database. So you could do other things if the tool doesn't provide you all the capabilities to do it yourself. So
yeah.
It's like, you can make Excel do a lot of things, but not everything needs to be in Excel. So I would, and you can obviously spin up different tools, vibe code different tools to kind of, but again, you are now you have to maintain that. I think people think of how easy it is to build something, but then now there's the maintenance cost of, some product manager is going to want a new feature to this annotation tool. And now someone has to build that new feature. Do you want to be building features for annotation tools, or do you want to be like focused on building whatever your business actually does?
Do you think people are not thinking about the maintenance cost of stuff?
I don't think. Yeah, I think they're like, it's easy to build, but unfortunately, it doesn't always mean it's easy to maintain, because maybe the AI, the tools can help you maintain it a little easier. I would agree, but you still have to have someone think about the maintenance of that.
Yeah.
So.
Also, who has time to add features when you're doing other shit too? So
you're trying to build a business, not try to,
You're not trying to become Big Eval yourself,
Yeah. I mean, obviously there's always the build versus buy, right? You always have to think about that. Sometimes it is better to build things. In this case, I don't typically think it is, but. All right. So why do you recommend binary pass-fail evaluations instead of 1 to 5 ratings?
Yeah, makes sense. It is subjective.
Yeah. I mean,
that's why.
No, go ahead.
That's why maybe you shouldn't assign scores, and like maybe you should assign like qualitative labels, right? So like good, fair, or whatever, great. And then you can like turn those into numbers if you want, or you can use those as labels or something like that. It is more complicated than yes, no, for sure.
Yeah, I think yes, no is easier, but ultimately, let's say you do like a 1 to 10 scale, you end up with it being like yes, maybe, or no, where it's like kind of like if you're familiar with like net promoter score, right? Like I don't remember what it is, like 8, 9, and 10 are like your promoters, and then anything less than a certain number is like your detractors, and then the middle are just the middle. Like so you kind of still build, like you would then kind of decide for yourself what those ranges are of what you'd consider a pass or a fail. But
Yeah.
so I think you'd eventually get there anyways. But when in doubt, if you're just starting out, just yes or no is probably simple.
Yeah, if you can determine between like a score of 3 or 4 on a 5 scale, maybe that's okay if you're getting a lot of 5s, like but you don't want a lot of 2s and 3s more so than, or maybe you get a bunch of 3s and 4s. Like you're gonna have to dive into those because it's not, once you're done the eval, it's not like the work is done. You have to maintain it and like keep looking at how the numbers change, because now it's like an ops problem.
This one is, I think, a little bit tricky. How do you eval or debug multi-turn conversation traces? So assuming you're having a conversation with an agent, how do you make sure that, evals are supposed to tell you if something worked or it didn't, if it was good or if it was bad? What about if it's multiple interactions? How do you judge that?
Yeah, this one's really tricky. And there needs to be more tooling around doing this. If you control memory, you can make some nice tools around this for sure. Or you can like process you can like score the chat, its chat history itself. But dude, there could be a shit ton of messages in there too.
Yeah.
Like a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's why you kind of need to be able to evaluate individual messages. Was this answer to this question good or not? You don't, without maybe all the context, but then you also want to be able to check the entire conversation. Like, at the end of it, did it meet the goal of whatever the user was trying to do? If you call into a voice agent and you want to book an appointment, did the user actually book the appointment at the end of talking to the voice agent, or did they get distracted and they didn't? That's a pass or a fail.
Yeah. It becomes a lot easier when it's a finite time on the conversation. Like if this was like your therapist buddy or whatever that has this like memories for years, then you can't really eval the conversation. You'd have to figure out a time range that you'd want to eval, right? And so then that's like your finite points in time. Then it gets a little easier.
Yeah. So that's very tricky. Should I build automated evaluators for every failure mode? I'm reading it along with everyone else, so to see if I agree. Yeah. So I mean, I think it's basically, should you, for every single type of failure, should you build some kind of evaluation for it, and should you use an LLM as a judge for every one of those? If you think about it, if you have a bunch of different try catches, should you be evaluating every try catch? I don't know. I think it's just like test coverage. There you need you don't need 100% test coverage. You need the right amount for you.
Yeah, you need like all happy paths and then absolute failures pretty much covered.
Yeah.
But I'm sure he hates getting questions like this because we do as well, because the answer is it depends, right? Like that's the worst one.
Yeah. There's not easy answers to some of this stuff. How many people should annotate my LLM outputs? So if you want human annotators to come in and annotate your evals or your outputs,
it's going to be really funny to have annotation teams. A lot of people outsource this stuff too, like annotation.com or some outsourced version of this too.
Yeah, just like there's like entire companies that just do like data labeling. There's going to be entire companies that just do data or like eval annotation or LLM output annotation.
Yeah, there's a couple in YC, I believe, but I think it's more like at runtime you can like ask like a tool call that actually talks to an expert, to get an answer. Yeah. I'm sure, isn't Scale AI just a bunch of people annotating stuff?
Basically, yeah. I mean, they're annotating they're labeling data for that to then be consumed for training. But ultimately, it's just you're always annotating. I mean, technically, yes, you're just annotating data that will probably then be reused for more training down the line, anyways. So yes.
Yeah, most companies aren't at the sophistication of having human annotators. but I'm sure like it's going to become a thing as big companies get like on board.
Yeah. Well, especially if you're trying to automate, some kind of professional, whether it's accounting, law, doctors, things like that, where you want to provide certain types of advice that are very
Yeah.
specialized knowledge, then having someone judge. So, for us, like I couldn't judge medical, right? Like
Yeah.
I would not have the background, but I could probably judge, you know, JavaScript or PHP or something, like if that's specialization. So, or did this, does this chunk of code do what needs to be done? Like I could judge that. So I think that anything that has like specialized knowledge, maybe you and
Yeah.
I will eventually just be like annotating code agents. Did this work?
Dude. Yeah, we'll be has-beens, and that'll be the only job we can
Yeah,
get.
that'll be
Just annotate shit.
we'll be data annotation.
Oh,
just
we
for
used to have
code
good
agents.
careers.
Yeah.
Well, if you think about it, right? If you think about it like this, like all coding agents, all users of them are the experts. So it kind of like makes sense why all these like lovables and etc. like proliferated without necessarily maybe writing evals at all, right? Because the users themselves are the experts, and they're just hitting like and dislike on those chats. So it's actually like a great way to get feedback from live production.
Yeah, exactly. So back to multi-turn, and Ansuman says you can also check if tool calling is aligned or not. This is actually important because if you have an LLM that can call tools, that throws external data into the mix, which makes it even harder to eval.
Yeah.
Because you have to now eval, did they call the right tool? Then based on the data they return, did they get the right response? So you can actually eval now at multiple points.
Yeah.
But still, that's why, checking the call and the response as a whole is often easier, at least more straightforward to get started. Is like, did it roughly do what we needed it to do? Yes or no? Now look at the actual like steps decisions it made along the way.
Yeah, there's some off-the-shelf ones for this. Like tool correctness is like you tell it what tool calls you expect it in what order, and then what the shape of the arguments is, because there's no way you can actually really know. And then you have then there's JSON correctness, which is the output. If it's JSON of a tool, like is the shape correct? Is it a pass the Zod schema or whatever? So those are like some interesting ones too.
What gaps in eval tooling should I be prepared to fill myself? Okay, this one's kind of long, so we will all. So first one's error analysis and pattern discovery.
Yep. But people want other people to do it for them. It's human nature.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely need. Yeah, this is kind of like the vibe check. Does it pass the right vibe checks? You need someone that can be the arbiter of vibes of like, is this the right tone? Is this the right response? You need someone that can own that. So AI powered assistance throughout the workflow. You want the LLM to be able to basically help through this. Okay.
Yeah, sure. A lot of companies are building that too. So.
Custom evaluators. Yeah, you should be prepared to build your own custom evaluators. Agree. Definitely agree on this. And I kind of mostly agree with this too, that I think that generic metrics are useful in that they help you understand what evals are, but I question their usefulness for most applications. Like ultimately, I think if you haven't used evals, you should probably just turn a few on so you can get the idea of like how it works. And then you should then spend time like writing your own custom evals.
Yeah. Big Eval does not like that statement.
Yeah. We're not here to please Big Eval.
No. Fuck Big Eval.
APIs that support custom annotation apps. So again, this is their opinion that you should build your own custom annotation app. I don't think you need a custom annotation app because I think it leaves too much in the eye of the beholder. You're spending time building part of an application that could, maybe is a spreadsheet or whatever. Like, I don't know. It's not, I understand that they're not the most sophisticated tools to build, but then you have to worry about the maintenance. I do think that I would say if you are using a non-custom annotation app, you should then make sure that you have access to the data. So
Yes.
you could, ideally you have an API. So if you needed to at some point build your own, you could.
Yeah.
But you need to make sure you can get your data out, or you can Splunk that data, because ultimately the tool may not provide the right observability for what you need to dig into. So if you have access to the database or you have access to export it, something, just make sure you have.
Yeah, that should be a requirement for using these other platforms.
And I guess they mentioned that here too, like true bulk export.
Yeah.
Or ideally,
it's still whack.
Yeah, ideally just access to the database if you know.
Yeah.
All right. What is the best approach for generating synthetic data? How far are we? Dang, this thing's.
There's a lot.
Yeah, this thing's long. We're about
this
halfway.
This is a deep dive. Yeah.
Yeah, we are going deep. We're going deep.
Maybe we can skip this question because no one is even here yet in life. That's synthetic data.
Yeah. All right, synthetic data.
This is a good one. But it's kind of just basic answer.
So it's talking about, error analysis is what you need. Promoting this course.
We don't need to go over RAG, so you should watch Nick's workshop. He can teach you RAG.
Yeah, how do I choose the right chunk size? Yep, we have a RAG workshop. We can learn. But this one's very there's some good guidelines here, I would look at. But I do think, if you need to learn the basics of RAG to understand what chunk size and how it actually impacts, because again, you have to eval your RAG systems as well. Every time introducing, quote unquote context engineering, where you are manipulating the context, you need to eval, did you get the right context in place? And then did it actually respond based on how you expected? So here we're talking about evaluating the RAG system. And again, I guess I just said this, but you need to eval retrieval and you need to eval generation. So that's kind of how you should think about it. You need to eval both sides. Bunch of good information here. There's a framework from Jason Liu. Shout out to him. All right. What makes a good custom interface for reviewing LLM outputs?
Who cares?
Yeah.
Don't do it.
You can, if you want to build your own, there you go. Have at it.
GLHF if you want to build your own.
Yeah. Do your thing, do
your thing.
All right. How much this is kind of interesting because I think this will be contentious. How much should you allocate to evals?
Is this in terms of talent, development budget, or is it tools?
So I think it's more in terms of how much time you should expect to spend. I think this is actually this is the highlight. This is probably why it's bold. So in their case, and again, they're probably decide if it's relevant to your case, but 60-80% of the development time was just error analysis and evaluation. So that means if you think about that, 20 to 40% of the time was actually building the thing.
Yep.
The rest of the time was making sure, does this thing actually work? And that's why most people that do a little bit with AI, they this is the first you probably went through it, right? I'm speaking, I think, for 80% of the people listening to this. The first time you use it, you're like, holy cow, this is amazing. I can't believe all the things that this can do. And then you go a little deeper and you're like, this shit sucks.
Yeah.
It doesn't answer correctly all the time. It's who can 50% of the time it's right, 50% of the time it leads you in some loop.
Yeah.
And it's terrible. And that is probably why here it says 60 to 80% of the development time is just on making sure the quality is good enough. That's what evals are, right? It's making sure that the quality of your application is good enough, because everyone's gone through that moment of wow, this can do so many amazing things. wow, this is terrible, to now like, okay, if you want to make it good, it's still just like if you want to build a, if you're writing code and you want to build a good application, you got to spend a lot of time on the details. You can get like 80% done really quick, and then like getting the polish takes forever. I think that's what this is the new polish.
When we built our docs agent, the docs agent itself is like leveraging all the stuff we've already built. So building it was super easy, but then it just did not listen to people the way we wanted it to. And we did spend a shit ton of time. We wrote evals too, but even then we vibe checked that mostly, and it still took most of the time.
Yeah. I mean, you should just expect to spend it, even though you can build things really fast with these AI tools. You can't turn the AI tools and just hope that they're going to eval it and improve it, and not yet, maybe someday. Yeah. So expect to spend a lot of time. And this is where I think most teams, this is why I'm going to like keep harping on this point. I don't think people understand that it actually, that's where you're going to be spending a lot of your time. It's not just building the application, it's making sure that the application works reliably.
Yeah. Yeah. AGI is not going to save you right now.
And I think this is a good point too, that I would agree with. It's kind of makes sense. If you're passing 100% of the time, you probably didn't write your eval, well enough. It's probably too easy,
way too easy.
So maybe you should be having like a lower pass rate, but you do want to make sure, the reason it's nice to have that is you can make sure that as you improve, quote unquote, improve things, you don't decrease your score going forward.
Yeah.
We got a comment here from Pedro. Building a product for the healthcare market here in Brazil. Mastra was a game changer. That's cool, Pedro. That's good to hear.
Nice.
Original plans were to use LangChain, but being able to have everything on the same mono repo is awesome. Cool.
Thanks, Pedro. Glad you're enjoying it.
Yeah, and thanks for tuning in.
Big things popping.
All right. Why is error analysis so important in LLM evals, and how is it performed? So we'll just go over the high level here. I encourage you to read up, if you're interested in how to do this. You need some kind of data set. You need some kind of human annotator, and, a big word, Axio coding, basically figure out failure categories, right? Like categorize the failures and then refine it over time. So it's kind of just an iterative loop, right? Create a data set, do some annotation, categorize it, refine it, repeat.
Yeah. This is nothing new either. Like if you've done DevOps, this is DevOps. We do this all the time. Same shit. So yeah, thanks for inventing new words, everybody. Thank you.
So it's the collision of builders and machine learning experts. It's just like, we got to have this new taxonomy of terms. Like we have to learn some ML terms, and they have to learn some general, like.
Yeah, I'm gonna go do some axial coding right now. What the fuck? You
mean you're just gonna like categorize things into labels?
Okay. Why didn't you just say that, bro?
Make others feel inferior with
so.
Terminology. All right, what's the difference between guardrails and evaluators? Okay,
this is a good one.
Guardrails are inline safety check. Yes, so guardrails should be able to say, like, should be able to stop something from happening, right? It should be able to like short circuit the response and say, this thing is gone off the rails, quote unquote, guardrails, right? It's gone off the rails. We need to stop it. You could think about this as like, copyright checks and like image generation, right? Like if you use OpenAI and you ask for some copyright stuff, sometimes it'll start generating the image and then it'll stop if you use ChatGPT. Or it could be, like hate speech or something like that, right? You want to make sure that the agent they can't get the agent to say something you don't want it to say. So typically guardrails need to be faster, but they're less extensive than an evaluator. And I think that's what, I haven't read this, but yeah, fast and deterministic, simple and explainable. Yeah. Clear cut, high impact failures. Yeah. Like leaks, profanity. Exactly. So it's like, these are the quick checks. And then you have the more detailed and more expensive, maybe evals that run after, off the main path.
Yeah. But the mechanism can be the same. You could run an eval inside a guardrail to then determine if you want to say yes or no, should I do that? But then the problem is latency is very high. So you really have to use really fast models, and then you have to have a really scoped prompt that can return very quickly, because you don't want the user to wait for
Yes.
like your latency.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the mechanism, you're right, is like the same thing. It's like take this data, this maybe input output response or whatever, and then judge it. And often guardrails are going to be pass or fail, right? It's like
Yep.
either 1 or 0, similar to what we talked about earlier.
Yep.
And it's like, does this have profanity? Okay, stop it. Otherwise, let it
Yep.
go. Or that's a very simple yes or no, right?
Yes. And also, evals don't mean LLM is judge. I could write a function that looks at the text and looks for all the bad words, right? So it is still a scoring and eval, yes, no. It's all the same shit if you think about it. Like, it really
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, you don't have to use an LLM. Yeah, you can just write a function, right? And there's some like different libraries to do some of these checks where, and ideally, if you can make it not have to use an LLM, it's going to be faster, right? So, but there are some things you might need to use LLMs to check for. So,
Yeah.
all right. Next up, what's a minimal viable evaluation setup? Spend 30 minutes. I'm not a fan of using
Don't use
notebooks.
notebooks.
Yeah, unless you.
So-
I mean, if
Unless-
this is how I know you come from the Python world. If you're like
Yeah.
use notebooks, I don't know.
Yeah. Like notebooks are so good.
Yeah, it's whatever. Like
I'd rather use Google Sheets.
yeah, use your tools. I guess if you know notebooks, yeah, use notebooks. But if you don't, if you're coming from the non-Python world and you don't know what notebooks are, don't spend time learning how notebooks work. There's better ways to do that.
Yeah, for sure.
Um,
This one's relevant.
yeah, relevant to a comment we just got too. But how do I evaluate agentic workflows? So if you're actually building a multi-step workflow.
Yep. We're gonna be adding our evaluations to workflows, so this will be built into, which will help people. But yeah, like you said, and it's very much follows the primitive path of the workflow. Workflows have an execution, like a run, and then they have steps within that execution, and then you can do control loops and all that stuff. So there's so much to evaluate if you're doing an agentic version of this, because sometimes based on a LLM call, a branch could turn on or off, right? So you need both the entire input to output, then you also need step level execution. And it doesn't have to be LLM as a judge, right? You can just have functions and whatever you need to make sure everything is good. And then you can also have guardrails on steps too. So like that type of stuff can happen, and you can stop execution of the workflow based on the input and output, things like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you want to test. You want to be able to test the entire thing. Did it work or not? And then test individual steps in the thing. So, and a couple comments. Love you guys. Thanks.
Nordine,
Appreciate you.
thank you. Love you too.
Want to give a shout out. Has all that should say agentic. Yeah, and Samahia corrected that. I've seen has all these things weaved into one: zero config, tool testing, agent testing, workflows, observability. Awesome. Glad you like it. Let us know how. Yeah, let us know how we can keep improving. All right, so just some more kind of context. I'm not going to spend time digging into this. Definitely read this if you would like to learn more.
Oh, shots fired on this. Eval, big eval vendor.
Yeah, this is a big eval question.
Yeah, because
who paid him the most?
Yeah. How much did they pay to have him say?
How much did you all pay to get on this list?
Hamill was at the Arise conference, so maybe.
Yeah, so maybe
big
that
eval going on.
Yeah, it's like it's got to be a love-hate relationship, right?
Yeah, he must have got a bunch of these types of questions at that conference, which
I'm sure.
Inspired.
So who can offer?
He's a consultant, right? That's his job.
Yeah. So he gets paid to come in and help you build evals.
Yeah, that's cool. It's a good hustle.
Yeah, I mean everyone's trying to figure out evals, so the market is hot.
Good place to make money.
Yeah. So yeah, I mentioned some on like eval vendors. There's a whole bunch more than this.
A whole bunch.
Yep.
Like every day there's a new one.
Yep.
They're all doing the same thing.
Yeah. There are, I would say, I bet you if you spent 10 minutes, you could find 100, maybe 50 different people doing this same types of things, all advertising the same features.
Yeah.
My general advice is to find something that's not going to completely lock you in. That's just general advice.
Yep.
So, ooh, this is a really good question because we talk about this. Yeah, we talk about this a lot. We hear it a lot. Yeah. How are evaluation used differently in CI/CD, which typically means you're going to be doing it on a data set versus production monitoring? So test data sets for CI are small, in many cases 100 examples and purpose-built. So you want to test for specific things and make sure that as you change your agent or your workflows over time, those evals don't seriously degrade, right? You want to see them improve. So core features, regression tests, and CI tests are run frequently. So the cost of each test has to be carefully considered. A lot of times this means you have something that runs on CI/CD, but only when your prompt changes or only when your agent changes. So you don't run it on every PR, but maybe you run it on PRs that affect this part of the code, right?
Yeah, you could spend so much money so quickly.
Yeah.
Don't do it on. Honestly, either don't do it at all. That's my opinion. Don't do it at all. Do error analysis outside of the fact. But then maybe you just want to have like if like your whole, like the most drastic error case should be tested.
Yeah. And then evaluating production traffic, you can sample live traces. So you could run it on every single, trace that comes in or just a sample, so you don't want to run it on everything. And you might rely more on expensive LLM as judge evaluators. Yes, typically with a more expensive model. One of the things that I recommend, and I think he alludes to it here, is that oftentimes you'll look at failures that happen in production or things that are answered really well, and those become test cases in your data set for your CI. So you look at the production data and the evals in production, and then you decide which ones you want to maybe pull into a data set and make sure that like either this answered it really well. So you want to make sure that as you improve your agent, you don't lose and you don't go backwards on that correct answer, or it didn't answer it well. And now you want to try to solve it so it will answer that question better.
Yeah. Just DevOps now. Same kind of principle.
Similarity metrics. Yeah. I mean, I think for the most part, I don't think they're that useful, but
yeah. Here's that other one that you already answered. So that's good.
Should I use ready to use, so off the shelf eval metrics? Hey,
no.
I mean, this is kind of what I said though.
Yeah.
Maybe you should hire me to do. Maybe you should hire me to do write your evals. I'll be a consultant.
Yeah, we have a new business, Shane Consulting.
Yeah, hey, the funny thing is I didn't even read this, so it's funny that if you talk about this stuff enough with people, you must come to these same kind of conclusions.
Yeah.
But this is just generic evaluations. I think are pretty. They're feel good metrics. They feel good, but I do think they can be useful in the beginning. So you have something. You need something. You need to understand how evals work. Just turn them on, see how they work. If you do decide to use them, just be selective about which ones you use. Don't turn on 500 metrics because you're just going to be overloaded with data. So I just pick a few that you do think provide you measurable impact. So maybe there's a few that you could use, but I think for the most part, I agree with this.
Yeah.
And this is kind of the point. Good scores on some of these metrics don't mean your system works. That's why a custom eval specifically targeting what you're trying to accomplish is usually better.
Yeah. How can I efficiently sample? Yeah, just sample stuff, dude.
Yeah.
You know,
We did
these
it.
ratios, we did it.
We went through this whole thing. Dang.
Yeah.
That took way longer than I expected. I thought that was going to take like 10 minutes.
Yeah, but it was full of really good information.
Yeah. So hopefully you all, we definitely went deep on this. Of course, you can read this article. You know, we didn't write it, but I would agree with, you know, I would say 80% of it I agree with, which is probably the right amount.
Yeah. And the good thing is most of the stuff in here will be supported in Mastra. So
Yeah.
if not all the things we agree with will definitely be in Mastra for sure.
Yeah, maybe that's a good segue. We should talk at least a little bit about what are some of the things we are doing in Mastra now, because if you use Mastra for a while, you know we do have an evals framework built in, but we've spent a lot of time, just as Hamel has, like talking to a lot of people that are thinking about evals, working on evals, struggling with evals, and we've learned that it was pretty apparent we needed to kind of rework and improve. Well, kind of what I would consider, we kind of built the initial version pretty quickly, and now we're trying to build the right version.
Yeah. So when we first built evals, we built it in our second week of YC, I believe, when all the homies, like the founding engineers, came to SF, and we did a little like offsite kind of thing. And usually during offsites, you like focus on certain problems, and you come out with, you know, at that time we didn't care because we're just trying to produce anything, right? So that evals from back then, January, which is not that long ago, that's kind of what we stuck with. And we had a lot of inspiration at that time, and things were a little bit more naive than they are today. So we are refactoring all of our evals, and we're actually not going to call them evals. Evals is like a category, right? Like this is just a category of things that you do, evaluations, whatever. I don't know if we landed on a perfect name, but you know, what you're really trying to do is score different parts of your application. So we're trying to call them scorers right now. That's a maybe name pending. But what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to create code scorers, which are just functions that you can then put in the eval pipeline, or you could put in a guardrail pipeline. There will be LLM as a judge, but I don't think we're going to call it LLM as a judge. Maybe it's just an agent, a specific type of agent that has access to certain tools that it may need to do certain things. But what we're kind of like coming down on is like there's a pattern here for running these pipelines, and we're going to kind of explore that. But like there's three things you need to do an evaluation. You need to extract data from your data points, and the data points here for an agent call or LLM call are the inputs, outputs, options like temperature, etc. So you need to have all the data of what happened. So yeah, then you extract data. So for example, if I was doing something like answer relevancy, which is a off-the-shelf eval, the extraction point of answer relevancy is extracting the facts or statements from the output. Because you know, LLM responses may have a bunch of paragraphs and shit, right? There could be a whole narrative in there, and you want to know. And some sentences are more structural than actually providing information. It's just how English works. So you extract the facts out of there. So that's extract. Then you score it, right? So based on the input, based on these statements that I've collected and extracted, I need to then assess a scoring process. That could be a function that is just doing some NLP or any library, or that could be another LLM call to score it based on what is extracted. And then lastly, this is optional, just like Hamel was saying, he doesn't care about reasons. If you do care about reasoning, then you can provide a reason step where it's like, hey, I've extracted this data, I've scored it. Why did it score this way? And at the end, now you have like 3 prongs of information that you can store. And then if you did yes, no, or a score, you can track it over time. It should be super easy to write these things. Like, I think a lot of people are scared to do custom evals. Like Hamel definitely talks about it like it's like the best thing to do. But if you don't know what to do, then like, and it feels like a lot of people don't know what to do, which means there's probably some bad UX and DX out there that's preventing people from just easily understanding how to do this shit, right? And then there's a bunch of questions of how do I add it to agentic workflows, and how do I add it here? How do I add it there? It should just be obvious, right? So that's what we're going to do. We want to make evals cool. So you can just take these different scorers that you create and just put them everywhere. Whether that's, you should be able to do whatever you want, right? And you should put them anywhere, everywhere, collect the data. And then if you like our UX and our design habits and stuff, maybe you'll like our annotation tool or whatever we create. We haven't really thought that far ahead. But it really does come down to it's like a pipeline. Guardrails are a pipeline too, if you think about it. But they just run, during and before the request. So that's what we're kind of shaking and baking on. I could show an architecture diagram.
Yeah, let's answer a question while you get that pulled up.
A show.
Sorry, Pedro asks, how do you handle that observability? You just dump everything on Posthog with OTel, save logs to a database. So one of the nice things about Mastra is you get to specify where you want this to, this data to be stored. You can kind of bring your own storage, so to speak. And so you get to pick what you want it to be in a Postgres database. You want to use Supabase, ultimately you can choose. And we do emit OTel, so you can pump it into any observability provider that you want.
Yeah. With this V2 of our evaluations, OTel traces may not be the right thing, but it's the right transport layer that all these applications speak. It's a standard. So whether you use the raw OTel trace or not, it has all the data you need. What we're planning on doing is emitting OTel. Everyone can use OTel, and that's cool. We might transform OTel into a different format, or there are new libraries coming out that's are making new standards for open, essentially LLMs and traces, right? Maybe all the old shit of an old trace from back in the day. Not all fields are relevant, and we see this all the time, right, Shane? A lot of trace fields are not relevant. We've had to trim out a bunch of stuff. It's just very verbose, So yeah, we store it in your database, whatever database you bring. Yeah, we don't do Posthog unless you want to. I guess you could. That's on you though. But yeah, there are two kind of data types you need to store to do evaluations. You need to store logs. You don't necessarily need to store them, but you should just have them. Traces, which traces kind of tell you what has happened during the request, so tool calls, the LLM calls, etc., and within a workflow as well, all the steps, etc. And with those things, you can then eval stuff on demand, or you could do it live. But yeah, that's the answer to that. Let me share my screen. Is there any other questions or?
No, that's it for now. If you are watching this live, let us know if you leave a comment on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on X, and we will try to answer some questions if you have them.
Sorry, I'm getting some unknown number hitting me up once again. All right, cool.
Probably someone that saw you live and wants to get in.
818 number, dude. They're trying to mimic area codes that I know. Those assholes. Okay, so if you're not familiar with Mastra, some of this stuff might be unknown to you, but I'm gonna go through it as if you know something. But if you don't, that's chill. Mastra at its core can be run as a library or a framework. So when I say library, you can set up Mastra and then use it within Next.js, Express, whatever, where you own the server, and that's cool. You can also expose Mastra as its own server. It uses Hono, and for example, if you're using Next.js, maybe you have API chat as an endpoint, and maybe if you're using Mastra, we have our own generate function and whatever. Any of those things, whether you use Next.js or not, or Mastra server or whatever you use, Mastra internally will output OTel traces for all the internals that it does. So we have all the primitives and methods that it does. We have this thing called auto tracer that we put on our primitive classes like memory and agents, etc. And then we essentially instrument the parent and child spans. So we have for the traces, we have internal methods being traced and then excluded from the user. We have tool calls, memory, and all its methods. The agent call itself, AI SDK, which, that was funny today. I won't go into that. And then anything that's happening post-processing. So this is what happens. These are emitted as OTel traces. But I'm starting to realize that maybe OTel is whack. Like OTel is a good transport format, but maybe it's not a good consumption format, because a trace could have a parent span and a shit ton of spans in between. And then if you wanted to then assemble data, you have to essentially assemble it, right? You have to like filter and combine all these spans together. Also, fetching them in a database is annoying too. But Mastra stores all these traces in the database that you bring in Mastra storage, so you have access to the data. What we're thinking about doing though is transforming the OTel traces into like a different format, or maybe use some open source library that's trying to create a new standard there, where we still emit OTel for people, but then for internal purposes, we have something called a run or XYZ. I don't know. But once you assemble runs, you can then add them to data sets. So you have data sets here, or you can run scores on them. And we were talking about all these concepts for the last like hour right now. So I'm not going to go into them again. But what scores output are scores. Scores output scores, which may relate to a certain trace, a certain run, a certain data set, a certain entity, right? Because in Mastra, maybe you want to do memory evals, maybe you want to do tool call evals, workflow evals, agent network evals. There are a lot of different entity types. So you need to know what the scores are for that. And then the types of scores, we're thinking they're either code scores or LLM, but it all comes down to this pipeline, right? Extract, score, and reason. You could probably do a lot of shit with just those 3 steps. And maybe there's some other custom steps. But anyway, so now you have like this structure here. And then it's really easy to build your own because we have like a framework for it. Lastly, with all these scores and stuff, and now we're tracking all the input options and everything, you could start playing around in what we're name pending Mastra CMS or something, which is like a whole playground for creating different configurations for your agents, workflows, memory, etc. Most big eval has prompts, like prompting is the way as the entry point. But what if it's actually like different models score better, different tool calls or MCP servers score better, different prompts and contexts score better? So why just version? Maybe you can version one thing, or you can version the whole configuration. And because Mastra already has dynamic agents, dynamic context, you could essentially just start A/B testing or versioning agents or workflows or any primitive, because now you're in the eval loop. So as you can see, requests all the way here. You can do some crazy shit. You go into the CMS, you start versioning things, deploying that. Now you're like looking at things as time series data and then doing an error analysis and everything Hamel just said. You're in the eval loop. Now, if I see some blog posts about the eval loop, I'm gonna know that they stole it from me. But yeah, so this is the architecture of what we're trying to do. And big eval wouldn't show it to you, but we are. That's it.
Sick, dude. Yeah, you got a glimpse into the roadmap of what we're building. So that's one of the nice things about tuning in is we're pretty open about most of the stuff we're working on. So you can see what's coming. Some of it already exists today. Some of it exists in a PR form. Some of it is going to exist tomorrow. So couple more comments from Pedro. New to AI, do you have any recommendations? So a couple things that I would recommend. Ultimately, read this book. If you are one that likes to consume books, you can get a digital copy for free here. It's not all about Mastra. It's general principles of building AI agents. So it has like high level stuff you should be thinking about. Talks about evals, talks about tracing, talks about how to write good prompts. I mean, it has a kind of sections in there for all this kind of stuff. So that's a good starting spot. If you are wanting to dive into Mastra and see like, how do I learn that? You can go here. We have a course that's actually you can use within Cursor or Windsurf or any other MCP supported editor. And you can actually take the course directly inside your IDE. So you say start Mastra course. It guides you through. It helps you write the code. It tells you why it wrote the code that it writes. It's pretty cool. And that's a good way to, if you just want to learn, okay, I'm convinced I want to try Mastra. How do I actually get started? That's a good way to get started. So that's high level how I'd recommend. And of course, there's there's so many resources out there that a lot of them are good. Some of them are not as good, but I would always recommend you start there. Suggestion: you should crop this Excalidraw section of the video and post it as a short. Yes,
We might. We just might actually.
Yeah, Pedro, that's a good idea, and we've thought about that. Honestly, some of it is I just don't have the time to always do it. But every week we have like good sections, and we will try to pull out a short of that, and maybe we could actually probably just crop that whole one and post it as a YouTube video as well.
Yeah. Maybe not today, because then we don't want Big Eval lurking on us today.
Yeah, you get this is like the intimate. They're not everyone's watching this. This is like an intimate group of 185 people right now just
seriously.
Watching this. So
but one thing about this, like we're working on it, our target date, and I don't like talking target dates, but I kind of want to stress the team out a little bit and put us on like a path. But we were planning at the end of July to have like our first version of everything I just fucking said. We'll see if we get there, but if you guys are amped, I am too. So
yeah, it's a lot of work, but someone from the team is watching this and just says, "What?"
Yes, you, John. You know what I said.
You, John's over there like, okay. No, he's down. I know his reaction. He's down for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll figure it out. We're working. We're trying to work fast on this to get it. Ultimately, we want to get some version. Ultimately, we get an earlier version in your hands so you can start testing it and let us know, and then we'll iterate and improve. All right, dude. That was a show.
Yeah, dude, it was a long show.
Yeah, I did not. I was actually thinking like this is gonna be 1 hour. We can get in and out. We did not make it. We doubled that time. Some would say maybe we need to improve I need to improve my estimation skills.
Nah, that Hamel thing was so rich and deep of stuff, so it was totally worth it.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely did a deep dive. So hopefully, if you did tune in, you felt like we went pretty deep. If you have questions, reach out, let us know. Come into our Discord, let's chat. If you have feature requests, bugs, post GitHub issues, that's the best place to go for that. And yeah. Anything else you want to say before we cut this thing?
No, we'll see you around. Get the book. We're the admirals of AI, by the way, if you didn't know.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
And just because, follow Abby on X, Abby Iyer. Follow me, SM Thomas 3. We can chat. And with that, see y'all.
Peace.